I'm Victoria from Biblio Lifestyle, and you're listening to the Reader's Couch podcast, the show that will help you bridge the gap between living a full and busy life to one where you're reading, learning new things, and having fun. Today on the couch, I'm so excited to welcome author Suzanne Rindell to talk about her novel Summer Fridays. Summer Fridays follows Sawyer, a young editorial assistant in New York City, during the summer of 1999. Her fiancé, Charles, is often busy with late nights and weekends at his law firm, alongside his close colleague, Kendra. So we see Sawyer find herself lonely most of the time. Then surprisingly, Nick, Kendra's boyfriend, reaches out to Sawyer despite their initial friction, and we see them form an unexpected friendship as they begin communicating about each other's troubled relationships. But as their partners continue to work late, Nick and Sawyer grow closer, sharing dreams, frustrations, and lots of Summer Friday adventures exploring the city. So in this episode, we talk about Suzanne's new book, Summer Fridays, and we learn more about her reading and writing life. But before we get into the episode, please take a few seconds to subscribe to the podcast so you're the first to know when new episodes are out. But also rate and review the show. Leave me those 5 stars because it really helps the podcast. And if you have something you'd like to share with me, click the send me a text link in the show's description and let me know what you think about this episode. You can also get in touch with me by using the Spotify Q&A feature if you're listening on that platform. So let me know if you read Summer Fridays, if your job provides Summer Fridays for you, if you've read any of Suzanne's other books, any thoughts about this episode, or you can just share the last book that you read and loved. I'd love to hear from you. So thanks in advance. And now onto the episode with author Suzanne Rindell. Hi friends, welcome again to the Reader's Couch. I'm your host, Victoria Wood, and here on the couch with me to talk about her new book, Summer Fridays, is author Suzanne Rindell. Hi Suzanne, welcome to Reader's Couch.
Lovely to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yay, I'm super excited to chat about Summer Fridays. But before we get into the book, how are you feeling that your novel is now out there and available for readers to get their hands on a copy?
Oh, well, actually, really good. I've been through this publishing process a few times. And what's interesting about this time is that I'm hearing from people that this book made them happy. My previous books they were historical mysteries. They often had a murder mystery. And not to devalue them in any way, but you don't often hear from people that your murder mystery made them happy. It's been lovely this time around. When the book came out, I did hear from a lot of people that the book was bringing them joy.
I'm so happy to hear that too, because this book gave me immense joy. It was so much fun. It was exactly what I needed when I needed it. So I really hope readers will turn to this one this summer because it really is lots of fun. But tell our listeners about your new book, Summer Fridays. What's your elevator pitch? Essentially, what can readers expect when they pick up a copy?
First of all, I think for the uninitiated, a lot of people know this, but not everybody does. Summer Fridays, that phrase, Summer Fridays are this thing in New York when certain industries like advertising or publishing get Friday afternoons off during the summertime. And the novel Summer Fridays it's a rom-com, but it's a rom-com that maybe leans a little bit more into the rom, less than the com. It's a love story. It's actually the story of 2 people who are not necessarily a couple. They're an unlikely pairing, and there are reasons why they can't be together, but these 2 people wind up spending their Summer Fridays together, and these afternoons just turn out to be very meaningful for them. And over the course of the summer, they find themselves changed. And I guess the natural question that follows is what's going to happen when the summer ends, and what if they can't let each other go? So that's pretty much like as short a nutshell I can get my book into.
It's a perfect summary, and I couldn't agree with you more. I have to admit, Summer Fridays was not something I was familiar with. My background before getting into the everything books was healthcare. So Summer Fridays did not exist in my world. I had no idea, but I remember the very first time I sent an email to a publisher. It was a Friday, and I got the return email back saying so-and-so is closed and will be for the June, July, August, essentially half day almost on Friday. So Summer Fridays was a very novel concept. Was this something you were familiar with for a long time?
Yes, I did work in publishing for a while. So I did actually have Summer Fridays. And it's kind of part of my inspiration for the book as well, because I was an assistant at the time, so I didn't exactly have the disposable income to go jet off to the Hamptons. The city empties out in New York on Friday afternoon. So I was alone in the city a lot of the time. And in certain ways, that can feel a little bit luxurious because you have Manhattan to yourself. But there's also this like deep loneliness too. So there's like a sort of like nostalgic feeling that I have towards Summer Fridays of the special sort of setting that it really does bring to life in New York City in the summertime.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Like I said, it's a very new novelty of mine. So it was really cool to then see a book named Summer Fridays. I was like, oh, I know what that is now. And to read all about the adventures. You also chose to set this one in 1999. Why that time?
Actually, that also it stems from my original inspiration for the book. And you get book ideas from all different kinds of places. And this one was actually from a memory of something that I actually witnessed. The first time I lived in New York, it was during 2001. And around sometime in October of 2001, I was riding the subway train. And this was like after 9/11 had happened. And so the city was very somber and very serious. And there's still these missing posters up. I remember looking at all the missing posters. It's very heart-wrenching to just move around the city. But this particular memory was I was on the train and these two people saw each other from across the train and they had this tearful reunion of they were so relieved to see each other again. And everybody on the train stopped and watched this couple reunite, kind of probably all of us wondering, like, what's their backstory? Like, how did they lose touch with each other? Were they worried about each other, during the attacks, etc.? And I always remembered that. At that time, I did not necessarily think I wanted to write about it just yet. I'm not sure I had thought I was going to write about 9/11 in any way, shape, or form. And this book isn't really 9/11 heavy, but this memory did spark something. I definitely felt like there's a book there, there's a story there. And it wasn't really until the pandemic when I noticed that people were getting back in touch with each other again. I had a lot of friends tell me that they had heard from former, like their exes and their former friends and things, people that they lost touch with. And it just made me feel like the feeling I had in the pandemic brought me back to that moment I had witnessed on the train. And I felt like it was time to write this story. And I'm rambling.
No, actually, that's really interesting to hear, especially for listeners. I'm not sure if folks might have heard that story from you before, but it must have been a profound moment on that train because while I've never been on the train system in New York before, I certainly have lots of experience with the underground in London. And it's like you pretend no one exists while you're there. Like you're just there. No one makes eye contact. No one looks at anyone. No one has conversation, really. You just mind your business, for lack of a better description. So to see two people embrace like that, and clearly there's a connection there, whatever that might be, that would have left a lasting memory on me for sure. And clearly it did you.
Yeah, and you never know where your next book is going to come from. Sometimes there are these little moments of your past that stay in your brain, and at a certain point later in time, you're suddenly ready to let that story like unspool from that spark of inspiration. And so that was the initial spark that led to me even going into this sort of like romance path. Because as I said previously, I'd always written historical murder mysteries. And now I'm finding that I've sort of entered into this rom-com world, which is a really vibrant part of the bookstore nowadays. And it's very capacious too. The rom-com category really does cover a lot of different kinds of tales. I was a little surprised to find myself here, but that initial memory was what sort of sparked me on needing to write this particular book.
Right, absolutely. And again, I know for a fact, myself included, we were connecting with lots of people during the pandemic. So I can see that memory from back then, and then the pandemic, just everything coming full circle. And I think it's cool seeing you go in this direction because I had read a previous book of yours, The Two Mrs. Carlyles, which I'll talk a bit about later. So seeing you in this space was really cool. So let's talk about the characters at the center of this book. So our main character is Sawyer. She's in New York City. She has aspirations, but she has a partner who seems to be very unavailable, working super late with a coworker called Kendra. Kendra, we also is working with Charles, and Kendra has a partner, Nick. So we see Nick and Sawyer essentially come together, though initially their first impressions of each other were very different. But we see them come together as their partners are super busy working, and we see them go on adventures. Every summer Friday, Sawyer has this bucket list going. We see them opening up to each other, getting to know each other. And like you said, the ending is when Summer Fridays comes to an end, what happens next? Where does their relationship go? Where does this friendship go? So I really enjoyed this novel. I don't want to spoil it for listeners. I had lots of fun, but I can't stop thinking about the Summer Friday adventures in this novel. So I want us to play a little game I want us to play a game called What to Do in New York City, because again, we see Sawyer's New York City bucket list. So I'm just going to ask you some situational questions and you'll share with me what you recommend. How does that sound?
Sure, sounds great.
Awesome. Okay, so for someone having Summer Fridays, yes, let's say we have someone who has Summer Fridays all this summer. They're in New York City. This is their first summer in the city. They have a bucket list too. What are the top 3 places you would say they should visit?
I'd say number 1 for sure is Central Park, because it's free and it's just so wonderful. There's so many different things there. And I myself, during those Summer Fridays, spent a lot of time in the park. There's, besides the Met Museum being right there, there's the pond with the rowboats, there's roller skating rinks, there's men playing chess. It's like a lot of life, and it's also, there's tranquil parts of it and there are vibrant parts of it. And it's so green and leafy. It really just embodies exactly what you think of a very leaf. And so you really can't go wrong with Central Park, especially if, like me at that time, you wanted to save a little money. So Central Park is wonderful. I highly recommend that. And this is actually something that Sawyer and Nick do in the book, and is also when you're trying to do something on a budget. They ride the Staten Island ferry, which is free and goes to Staten Island and back. But on that route, you go near the Statue of Liberty, so you get this great view of the Statue of Liberty. And I wouldn't necessarily think that sounds particularly glamorous, the Staten Island ferry, but it's really fun to ride the Staten Island ferry on a summer day when it's lovely out. So that's another recommendation. And then a third one I would say, let's see. I don't know. For me, in summertime, I'm big on the gelato or ice cream or dessert things to cool down. And if you're in love with like old school New York, old fashioned New York, I would say Serendipity, the ice cream parlor you've probably seen depicted in various movies and things. In fact, there's a rom-com film named Serendipity. And that's a charming place to go. In summertime, the city's kind of empty, so you can go there without standing in a long line and whatnot. So I don't know. Those are some of the things I did back during that time period. Nowadays, I would probably say being outdoors at Hudson River Park on the west side, walking the High Line. There's so many outdoor spaces now in New York that are just wonderful to be in during the summertime. You don't necessarily have to go all the way out to the beach to really just enjoy being outside or even outside near the water. Lots of those things are definitely on the top of what I would tell an actual friend. Don't miss this. I would definitely say go sit outside in Hudson River Park, go walk the High Line. So many things to do in Brooklyn too, near the water. Yeah, definitely. Those are good recommendations.
Awesome. Love that. So for someone who is new to New York, and again, first summer, and they want the New York food experience, what are 3 meals you think they should try on a summer Friday?
Again, I have Nick and Sawyer doing the very classic old school New York thing, Gray's Papaya hot dogs. You can't go wrong with that. That's something that New Yorkers take quite seriously, Gray's Papaya hot dogs. I also, one of the places I included, again, if you do being outdoors, and I just mentioned Hudson River Park is a great place to go be outdoors. There's a ship there called Grand Banks, and it's docked, but you can eat on the ship, and that gives you another nice feeling of being outside on the water on vacation instead of just having gotten off work and going to a restaurant. Okay, Okay, and then a third place would be another place that Sawyer and Nick visit. And this one I would recommend for the ambience. There's also food and lovely cocktails, but I think it's got this great ambience that on a summer afternoon feels very refreshing, like going into a dark library. And that would be the Campbell apartment, which is really like in the heart of Grand Central, which I don't know that many people are aware that there's a restaurant tucked in there. New Yorkers oftentimes know, and an occasional tourist will be following a guidebook there, but a lot of people miss it. So when you do find it, it's this historical apartment that Tycoon wanted to build inside of Grand Central that got turned into a restaurant. And it just has this lovely sort of like Gothic library feel to it, a very cool marble and nice, refreshing place to hide out from the summer heat in the middle of summertime in New York.
Awesome. Okay, so getting into your books and your writing. So I know you from the two Mrs. Carlyles, which is more historical fiction set in San Francisco. I just remember these two women. It gave me Rebecca and Mrs. De Winter and the second Mrs. De Winter, that whole kind of thing. So that was the vibe. To now writing Summer Fridays. Tell us about the switch and what was that like from just your writing point of view?
Again, I didn't necessarily plan so much to make such a dramatic pivot. It was the fact that I was inspired to write this particular story, and so I did. That said, once I started working on this book, it's a different animal than historical mystery. First of all, you are entering the publishing world all over again. I am this book's with a different imprint, and I'm with a new editor. And so you have to prove yourself all over again. So when you do make a switch like this, you are setting yourself up for going out as a first-time author almost for a second time. So there's that component to it. But then also there's the practical level stuff. Like when I decided, okay, I'm going to write this story and it's set in 1999 and 2001, I thought, oh, great, I'm not writing a historical, so this will be easier because I lived during that time. It's more familiar. It's contemporary to my experiences. But it's funny because, as so many people love to point out to me, 99 is historical. So there's still some things that I had to make sure I had correctly researched. Even though I lived in New York during 2000, 2001, I had to really go back and check and make sure certain things were open or there, or that kind of stuff, or remind myself simple technological things that we take for granted. If Sawyer is online, on America Online, AOL, then she probably couldn't get a phone call on her landline because when you got on the internet, it tied up your phone line. So little things like that. So that was interesting because I really did think I was going to get this easy shift into writing contemporary fiction. And yet I still picked something that's rather historical, even though it's a little bit more closer to my immediate time period that I've lived. So.
Okay. So even though we are here to chat about your book, Summer Fridays, I want to know about your reading life as well. So share with our listeners some of your favorite romance books.
Yeah, it's interesting because as I was saying earlier, this rom-com category that's emerged in recent years, I do think that this category has always existed, but it seems like the rom-com label is now taking on a slightly different shape. It includes a lot of different kinds of love stories, not just necessarily straight romance. You've got a lot of like authors taking on complicated family dynamics or grief or things like that in the rom-coms. And right now, what did I finish recently? The Guncle Abroad by Stephen Rowley, and I'm sure lots of people are going to pick that up. But I love Stephen Rowley's books because they're in the rom-com category, oftentimes lumped into it, but they're still quite literary in the sense that he talks about grief and death and things in the Guncle Abroad, and quite eloquently. So to me, it feels like it's a rom-com that has quite a lot of depth to it. And then right now I'm reading Summer Romance by Annabelle Monaghan. And again, she does that same type of thing where her characters oftentimes have complicated family dynamics or dealing with divorce and maybe grief as well, that kind of thing. These characters are very fully developed and very real. I almost feel like when I put the book down, they're a friend I am going to call later. Sometimes they're characters. And then one more that I would actually definitely put in this category of like rom-coms that are quite complex and well-developed characters is Amy Popple's books. And last year, one of my favorite books was and it really had an ensemble cast, but you really rooted for each one of them. So she really did such a great job at making these people come off the page. And I would recommend that to a friend, hands down. The Sweet Spot by Amy Poble.
Awesome. So what books are on your summer TBR? What books are you looking forward to reading? Like, you haven't read them yet, but you're looking forward to reading.
I'm loving summer romance that I'm in the middle of right now. And I just picked up a copy of Serendipity by Becky Chalson. And that's a rom-com that's set on New York's Fire Island. And I grabbed that one because I read reviews that her novels are also love letters to New York. She focuses on Fire Island, which is, again, used like a day trip outside of New York. And so I was just curious because, again, as you can tell by my novel, I love books where it's a love story about people, but it's also a love letter to your setting. So I was curious. I'm definitely looking forward to Serendipity by Becky Chalson.
Awesome. And what were your favorite childhood books growing up?
I don't know if I call it a favorite, but I do remember reading Bridge to Terabithia and it kicking off this streak of me reading books with tragic endings, because the fact that it really made me feel something, left an impression on me that books have this power to figuratively rip your heart out. And so that set off me reading, Of Mice and Men and Flowers for Algernon. That sounds really depressing, but I think the thing I remember about those books in particular is that it really made me aware that a book could make you bawl your eyes out. And I guess I thought, wow, this is powerful, and you really get your money's worth. There's something, the book made you feel something really passionately. So those are the books that I loved when I was like in grade school. And then, which that sounds so morbid for a kid, and then as a teenager, I think it turned into this thing where I was all about writing voice and style. And I was really into Scott Fitzgerald and Truman Capote, which I guess carried on into my grad school career. But yeah, as a teenager, it really was Fitzgerald and Capote.
No, that's actually pretty cool. That's really awesome. So getting back to your book, Summer Fridays, it's out there in the world. You've been hearing from readers, which I think is really amazing. What are you hoping in an ideal world that readers might think or feel or start to discuss after they've turned the very last page of Summer Fridays?
I guess the thing that I really want readers to get from the book or feel, hopefully, as if I've done my job well as an author, is like emotional truth. In terms of the romance, of course, but maybe emotional truth of having these big feelings in your early 20s when you're still trying to make it in the world. I'm hoping readers can really relate to that and that the book rings true when it comes to that. Because part of falling in love, like really deeply in love for the first time, is finding out who you are. You learn so much from the first person who really gets you to open up. And so I think that is really if a reader reaches out to me or leaves a review or something that articulates something of that manner, then that's when I feel like, okay, I did my job and I'm proud of this book. So that's what I would really want to have the reader feel upon turning the last page.
Oh, that's awesome. Suzanne, thank you so much for coming on the show and speaking with me. This has been fun.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for listening to the Reader's Couch podcast. Please subscribe to the show, share it with a friend, and take a few seconds to leave a rating and review. Until next time, stay lounging, stay reading, and whenever you're in doubt, go straight to your local bookstore or library. Thanks again for listening, and happy reading.